こんにちは。本日はミーティング&インセンティブビジネストラベルカンファレンス2020にご参加いただきましてありがとうございます。私は一般社団法人日本MICE協会理事長真野直美と申します。よろしくお願いします。本日の流れについて簡単にご説明いたします。第1部には基調講演のビデオをご紹介した後に、第2部はパネルディスカッションという流れになります。開催にあたりご協力いただいたのは渋谷キューズ、そして慶應義塾大学大学院メディアデザイン研究科地域みらいプロジェクトです。さて、第1部に移らせていただきたいと思います。本日は太平洋アジア観光協会パタの代表でございますマリオ・ハーディーさんからキーノートスピーチをお願いしております。ではマリオさん、よろしくお願いいたします。
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mario Hardy. I'm the CEO of the Pacific Asia Travel Association based in Bangkok in Thailand, as you can see from my wonderful background here. The Pacific Asia Travel Association was founded in 1951 in Hawaii with the purpose of actually, sending people to Asia. It was actually started by a group of tour operators who saw the potential to get people to visit Asia at the time. Now, this is actually 69 years ago, a very long time ago. The world has changed very much since then. Now it's probably actually the opposite, where Asia is now traveling to the rest of the world. PATA obviously has evolved over these years, and we're now an organization that actually promotes the sustainable and responsible development of tourism to, from, and within the Asia-Pacific region. Our members are global. Even though our name says Pacific Asia, our territories expand from Turkey all the way to South America. We have members in Africa, we have members in Europe, in every country in the world, actually. We have 99 government members around the world, destinations, ministries of tourism, we're members of the organization, an average of about 850 corporations, businesses, 76 universities, and thousands of students who studies either in tourism or hospitality sector or related sectors within tourism in general or travel. We organize lots of activities, conferences, and of course these days more webinars online. We organize also trainings, we have research, we do many activities to get our members to engage and essentially try to bring together both public and private sector. Now, in terms of my background, I've been with this organization for nearly 7 years. Prior to actually PATA, I worked in a completely different sector in the industry. I've worked in technology, or more specifically big data, in the aviation sector for almost 30 years. I actually came to the industry, to tourism sector in PATA, to its foundation, its charity organization, who has specific area of development in education, in travel and tourism. And to my interest, the foundation found myself actually getting involved in this wonderful organization, which is PATA today. Now, the purpose of this discussion today is to actually talk about the MICE industry more specifically around the world, but obviously also in Japan and its potential moving forward. Now, before we do that, I thought we'd spend at least a few minutes to talk about the current situation, which is actually impacting the entire world. When we talk about COVID-19 for travel and tourism, you have to keep in mind actually how much the impact has been on this sector specifically. Pre-COVID-19, we looked at numbers of, in terms of travel and tourism, of 10% contributions to GDP globally. Obviously, for some countries, it is much higher than that, like Thailand and other countries as well. Millions and millions of jobs actually in the travel sector. But when we talk about the impact of COVID-19, it is actually over 100 million jobs that are currently at risk with this current pandemic. It is $2.7 trillion of potential loss for the industry as an impact of COVID-19. Most of you, including myself, probably have many friends or family members who have lost their jobs during this crisis. It is 10 times bigger in terms of economic impact than the 2008 financial crisis, 10 times bigger. None of us actually in our entire life would have ever imagined that we would have complete aircraft, complete airlines being grounded, not for a day, not for weeks, but for months. No one would ever imagine that borders would be closed, nobody in, nobody out. No one would have imagined that we'd actually be spending months inside our house with not being allowed or have the ability to go outside. There are actually 5 stages of this crisis that were identified by many organizations such as TripAdvisor and also other international organizations. People use different terminologies, but they all actually pretty much mean the same thing. These 5 stages are, the first is the decline, which we saw quite early stage in February when we saw a decline in travel as people started to see the impact of COVID, the slowdown of travel started. The second was what we would call the plateau. This is the phase where most of us are being asked to actually stay at home on lockdown without the ability to leave our home or our premises. The next is what we call the emergence, when the lockdown are being relaxed and gradually people are allowed to travel within their city, go back to work, go back to some of their daily activities as they did before. The next step, which is what most countries are within this region here at the moment, which is domestic travel. The ability for us to travel not only within our city, within the province or state, or even within our country itself. The last stage, which very few in the countries in the world are at the moment, is international travel, meaning borders being open and the ability for us to cross borders and travel overseas. As for Thailand, our borders are currently closed. Only for exceptional reasons we're allowed to leave the country, but most importantly, the challenging part is not leaving, is actually coming back to the country afterwards. We suspect we will be in this stage for probably an extensive period of time until the end of the year, if not even longer at this point, which obviously causes impact on the tourism industry, on the MICE industry, conferences and etc. are not happening at the moment. They're happening online as we're doing today, and not physically. Now, what will happen within the next couple of months is we will likely go back and forth between these 5 stages. From probably the decline, that's already passed for now, but the plateau to the emergence, domestic and international, will go back and forth. As I'm sure you've been reading the news, you know what happened in Vietnam recently, which was COVID-free, and now actually are new cases appearing, also in Hong Kong, in Japan, in Korea, and several other countries. Fortunately for us in Thailand, we're actually still okay. We haven't had any cases for a number of weeks at the moment, and we hope we will remain this way for an extensive period of time. But as I mentioned, countries will go back and forth, which is making it very challenging for this sector to focus on the recovery, because the recovery could actually be only for a few months or even a few weeks in some cases. If there are new waves of cases reopening, you can imagine that we'll likely go back to closing borders and actually being on lockdown again, as we've seen in Spain or Australia or the UK, France, and other places around the world as well. COVID-19 is something that we're going to have to learn to live with for an extensive period of time. We hope that at some point within the next few months, if not year, a vaccine will be found and gradually people will get vaccinated and will be able to travel more easily. But the impact will be extensive. All international organizations, the United Nations World Tourism Organization, the WTTC, the World Travel Tourism Council, PATA, and many others, are all in agreement that we will not see a recovery to the levels we had pre-COVID-19 until 2024, or even possibly longer than that. So it means that our businesses need to adapt. We need to transform how we do business today and find new ways of generating incomes and diversifying our businesses if we want to be around in the next year's time while the recovery comes back. What it means for the MICE industry, which is the reason why we're gathered today, is that we'll need to adapt into doing more of the online events as we're doing today, or what we call also hybrid events, where People locally will gather in an environment, in a location, but maybe people internationally will actually be joining through video conferencing and a combination of both. We at PATA are already experimenting with some of these technologies at the moment in organizing hybrid events, both virtual and physical events. And our first one will be in the next few weeks in September, hosted in collaboration with the city of Leshan in China, where a physical event will be hosted for the Chinese domestic market, but international delegates will be attending virtually. We have organized in the last month, actually 1 month festival, which was organized online with live experiences where we actually got the opportunity to showcase various destinations around the world, but virtually, to continue to inspire people to travel into the future. So many of these new models will continue to appear in the future. But at some point, we hope we will actually go back to having physical events because they are important. Many of the people I've been speaking to over the last couple of months are missing that human contact that you get when you attend a physical event, when you meet people face to face. More so for people here who live in Asia. I've been living in this part of the world for 18 years, and I know how much the importance of meeting face to face is critical culturally here across Asia Pacific, and specifically in Japan as well as the rest of Asia. Meeting people at a conference means not only meeting old friends, but also making new friends and new business contacts. When you meet at social networking events or gatherings after the conference, most of us will probably tell you this is where the real business is happening. This is where we meet people we unexpectedly actually meet, that they weren't planned, they weren't something that was necessarily looking to meet at particular individuals, but we came across, chit chat, and then realized we have a lot of things in common, and sometimes actually leads to business deals being done at a later stage also. These critical face-to-face contacts are important. When you speak at conferences like this, which I do quite a lot over the years, and still do, doing it online as we do today is very different. I have no way of understanding if you're satisfied with what I'm saying. Are you smiling? Are you laughing? Are you sleepy because I'm not interesting? I have no way of actually knowing what really you're feeling at the moment in terms of the discussion. And again, this is something at a physical event. If you're standing up on stage looking at the audience, you get a feel and a sense of how the audience is feeling, and you adapt your speech as you move along. You can't do that easily in a virtual world. Now, when I think of Japan, I grew up understanding that Japan was one of the leading economic power in the world. So much that actually when I graduated from university, I actually went and studied Japanese because we were told that if you want to go into business, you have to learn English and you have to learn Japanese. So I spent 3 years learning Japanese and never had an opportunity in my life to practice except at a few occasions when I traveled to Japan. Sadly, when I finished my graduation and my courses, I was told, well, forget about Japanese, now you need to learn Chinese. And I said, no, that's too much. I just spent 3 years learning one language, and I'm not going to go ahead and learn a new one. I'm saying this because Japan has always been interesting for the West. We've always looked at Japan as an interesting culture, very different, mysterious in certain ways, and always wanted to explore. But we also had one of the negative points was actually that for us, we always perceived Japan as being excessively expensive. The places that were so expensive that most of us would not actually, couldn't imagine ourselves going and traveling to Japan for an extensive period of time. Now, of course, this was actually decades ago. Things have changed very much. It is now much more affordable to travel to Japan. And we also understand a bit more about the country than we did before. We also realize there is much more to Japan than just Tokyo. There are many beautiful other cities and villages across the country that are actually we're visiting. When we talk about the MICE industry specifically, there are certain challenges sometimes when we think about organizing events in Japan. We think of when you organize a meeting or corporate incentive with a smaller group of individuals. You need a lot of attention to details. There's an expectations from the travel planner that you're going to be looked after to the very, very minute details, because you as the organizer, you're focusing on organizing your agendas and your meetings and your objectives, and you want support locally on the ground who understand the culture, understand the venues and the areas you're going to visit, who's going to take care of you for all of this. Some of the challenges sometimes are around food. I'm vegetarian. My wife is completely vegetarian. I eat fish occasionally. My wife doesn't. And then so we had many challenges in the past traveling to Japan and trying to, getting our host to understand that we're pure vegetarian. We don't eat eggs, we don't eat fish, we don't eat meat at all, or any products coming from animals, which has been challenging. Now, we're one person and we're very easy to go by, and we're flexible and we'll adapt and we'll bring our own food if we have to, and we don't mind doing it. But if you're working with a group of VIPs from different cultures, if they're Muslims, if they were looking for halal food, or someone looking for vegetarian foods, these attention to details are extremely important, because that might be the one thing that goes wrong that people will remember when they go back from their trip. And that's not what you want. You want them to remember about the beautiful locations. You want them to remember about the wonderful experience they had, the wonderful people they've met, the wonderful smiles of the people they've met. Those are the things you want them to remember. The trends around the MICE industry have very much changed over recent years. And we've seen a lot more of what we call festivalizations of events or experiences also being organized. Some of the best events I've organized in recent years have been when I was going not to a conference room, not to an hotel boardroom, but when I was actually meeting people outside. I spent an event, an entire week's corporate event, where all we did is actually camping, climbing mountains, cycling. But this was a business trip. This was actually a trip where we're a corporate event where we're actually meant to be meeting with other people. We met with them as we exercised, as we sat outside in the evening around a fire camp and told our stories, found, we essentially built a bond between ourselves that is so strong that even years after, we still chat on WhatsApp and Facebook regularly. We follow up, we sign some business deals together, and etc. I've been to other activities that are actually similar in a completely different environment, where it is more of an enclosed environment. Maybe instead of organizing your event again in a conference facility or exhibition hall, it's organized in an art gallery. It's organized inside of a tunnel of World War II, or actually in the stadium, on the rooftop of a building. Unusual venues. A combination of venues and experiences will give something really, good memories for your delegates, for people participating, because not only they'll enjoy having met people in a different way, in a more social manner that is less formal. I remember an event I tried to organize in Guam a few years ago. It was a relatively big event. We had almost 800 participants to our event. But we told all our delegates that actually Guam is an island. People do not wear tie. They do not wear jackets. They wear flower shirts, island shirts, and it's a more casual environment. So we went a little bit extreme. We told all the participants that suits and ties were not allowed on the island. We made a joke about it and said, if you get caught at customs wearing a suit and a tie, you'll be sent back home. We made even logos about it with a no entry sign with a tie on it saying, do not enter the hall with a tie or you'll be actually sent back home. We joked about it. We had a lot of fun about it. But it also actually sent a message to people, come to the event to enjoy the island, to enjoy the people, to enjoy the event specifically, and not bother about the formalities and the tie and the suits and etc. Enjoy a more casual event. So those are all actually things that are actually critically important. Now, as I mentioned before, Japan has huge potential. It could be the #1 destination for MICE industry, not only in Asia Pacific, but in the world moving forward. You've got a unique culture. You've got wonderful, unusual venues where events can be hosted that you can't probably experience anywhere else. You've got beautiful nature outside of the big cities where people can enjoy activities, either sports activities or even going to a monastery and organizing some other activities that are actually very unique and very unusual to the country, which actually can make a fantastic event. You also have to think about how, beyond the hardware, beyond just the venue itself, about the service. Asia, we always say that people in Asia have a very strong service culture. In Thailand specifically, when people come here, they expect a smile. Actually, when I arrive in Thailand back from a trip, quite often, and you go to immigration, our immigration officers don't always smile, and it's the same in other countries too. And I always joke with them and remind them, I said, this is the country of smiles. Don't forget to smile when guests and tourists are actually coming. So each country around Asia have this unique feature in terms of service culture, which is critical. I've always had good experience every time I travel to Japan. Everywhere I've been, the hotels I've been, the restaurants I've been, the people I've met either in business or socially or culturally, I've always had a really big incline to go back to Japan for that reason. Japan is a very popular destination also amongst Thai people as both holiday destinations and also in terms of business. We at PATA every year when we run some of our annual summit and other events always conduct surveys. One of the questions we consistently ask every year is, if you had a choice of destination for our next event, where would it be? Japan is always either number 1 or number 2 on that list of places where they wish for us to actually bring some of our events. Sadly, PATA has not been to Japan for a number of years. We have organized events in the country before, many, many years ago. And I really hope and wish that over the next couple of months and years coming, we will be back to Japan to organize one of our events because we know it will be a great success. People do want to go and travel and experience Japan also. I remember one of our partner TripAdvisor who organized a workshop in Japan, I believe it was maybe 2 years ago. And I can't remember the name of the specific group of women, but I know that they're actually, anyone who I mentioned about this will probably know what I'm talking about. There's this group of women in Japan who are very famous for diving. So there was an experience organized specifically in that little area, in that village, where the participants of the workshop were able to get to meet these women, understand their culture, understand actually their way of living, and participate to actually cooking with them and doing some other exercise. Again, something which is really unique that you can only experience in Japan, that people will go back with phenomenal memories. I know that the people that I've met who participated to this event still talk about it today. That's been probably 3 years already, and they still talk about their experience there. And of course, always also the business they've done and the people they've met during that event. So I believe that actually, as I mentioned, the future is uncertain at the moment. We live in a fast evolving world. Things are changing at a phenomenal pace. And we have this level of uncertainty. However, I know for sure that we all want to travel. Many of the surveys we have conducted over the recent months have told us that people have a great desire to travel. You all have to actually look at when lockdowns are actually eased. The first thing people want to do is get out. They want to go outside. They want to go and experience nature again, as I did just 2 weeks ago when I came out of the city for the first time and traveled a little bit away from Bangkok to the beach area and enjoyed a week in nature where I wanted to disconnect from the world for a bit of a week because this situation is so intense at the moment. And the same way as I mentioned at the early stage in this conversation about the need for people to meet face to face. One of the reasons we organize our festival, a 1-month festival, was particularly because people were telling us we miss meeting each other in person. We miss going to some of the PATA events or some other big industry events that we normally participate in and attend. And they wanted an opportunity for them to meet. We could not offer them face-to-face meetings for the time being, but we gave them an opportunity to reconnect online, not only to learn and hear from speakers, but also the ability to network. We told people, bring your own drink, your coffee, your tea, your glass of wine, whichever is your preference. Join us for conversation and meet as you were before, but sadly in a 2D screen for the moment, until we can all get back together. So I remain optimistic and positive that within a due time, we will get back into meeting together. We may have to adapt our venues in order to be respect some of the protocols that are currently in place. We may have to use hand sanitizers more often. We may have to use masks in certain environments. We may have to distance ourselves. Maybe the setup of the conference or the meeting will be a little bit different, a little bit more distant from each other. But at least it'll give us an ability to get back into the same room and get to know each other, enjoy the different cultures and experiences that we can potentially do in each of our respective destinations as we travel. So as we get to a close to this discussion, I want to keep everyone with a positive mind and thinking that, yes, it may take weeks, if not months, before we all get back to some form of normality. But it will take quite some time for us to go back to the levels that we had before. So we'll have to adapt our business consequently and ensure that we have this ability to meet in the near future. So I've enjoyed sharing some of my insights with you, and I believe now we're going to go into more of a question period and discussions, and we'll expand on some of these areas a little bit more. So thank you very much. どうもありがとうございます。